I am sure the Americans can fix nothing without a drink. If you meet, you drink. If you part, you drink. If you make acquaintance, you drink. If you close a bargain, you drink. They quarrel in their drink and they make it up with a drink. They drink because it's hot, they drink because it's cold. If successful in elections, they drink and rejoice. If not, they drink and swear. They begin to drink early in the morning, they leave off late at night. They commence it early in life and they continue it until they drop down into the grave. English Captain Frederick Marryat, 1839. By Marryat's time, Americans as young as 15 were already drinking 3 times the amount of alcohol that Americans drink today. Alcohol abuse ruined many lives, especially in a time where women were entirely dependent on their husbands for support. One woman married her husband in 1874, only to find him drunk at their wedding. He died of excessive drinking only 6 months after their daughter was born. This woman's name was Carrie Nation, and she then went on to become an infamous temperance reformer, destroying saloons in Kansas in the early 1900s, famed for using a hatchet to smash bottles and wreck cabinets. Carrie's story, unfortunately, was only one of many women whose lives and families had been destroyed by alcohol abuse. Husbands often came home drunk, spent their money on alcohol, and behaved aggressively in the home. It was because of these problems that the temperance movement was formed. Founded in Cleveland, Ohio, 1874, the Women's Christian Temperance Union was one of the first of these temperance organizations. In this image, members of the union promote abstinence by kneeling in front of a saloon. The organization was actually quite successful, achieving anti-alcohol education in every single school in the country. While it was originally founded to promote abstinence, the organization eventually went on to assist the Anti-Saloon League in campaigning for legislative prohibition. The Anti-Saloon League was also founded in Ohio in 1893 with the primary purpose of achieving legal prohibition of alcohol through legislation. Using its funding from tens of thousands of churches across America, the ASL employed lawyers, statisticians, fundraisers, researchers, and publicists. The League used many tactics in its campaigns for prohibition, including propaganda posters, calling for voters to think about their religion, their family, and their country. When World War I started in 1914, the Anti-Saloon League took full advantage, reinforcing the connection between Germans and alcohol brewing. Furthermore, its ruthless campaigns called for Americans to stop drinking liquor to save grain for food. Giving up the drink to support American soldiers was the utmost form of patriotism, according to the ASL. Any politicians who dared oppose the ASL not only feared being labeled as unpatriotic, but also lost the votes of its many, many supporters. The ASL was such a political power in the early 1900s that its president, Wayne B. Wheeler, was once called the most feared and powerful man in the entirety of the United States. Due to the overwhelming support of the Prohibitionists, the House of Representatives produced the 18th Amendment to the Constitution on December 18, 1917, which banned the manufacture, sale, and transportation of alcoholic liquors across the country. The amendment was ratified in just 13 months. An additional document, drafted by Wayne B. Wheeler, outlined the legal reinforcement of prohibition, called the Volstead Act. It was passed by Congress on October 28, 1919. Both the 18th Amendment and the Volstead Act would come into effect on January 16, 1920. But how would the 20s play out? Would the new legislation be effective? And in what ways would the 18th Amendment change people's perceptions of their legal responsibilities and rights regarding alcohol? While alcohol was problematic before Prohibition, society generally accepted and promoted the use of it legally. However, as we will see, removing the right to access alcohol would only lead to greater issues and a widespread disregard for legal responsibilities regarding alcohol. On January 17, 1920, at 12:01 a.m., the Prohibition Amendment became law. Just a few minutes later, 6 masked bandits armed with pistols unloaded 2 freight cars full of whiskey in a Chicago rail yard. Unironically, this event, happening within the first few minutes of Prohibition, was a perfect foreshadowing of the decade to come. Every single saloon and alcohol store in the country was closed due to Prohibition laws. However, rather than shutting down completely, the alcohol market itself found a new home in a less legal industry. California vineyards, which had predicted to shut down, experienced skyrocketing demand, shipping suspiciously large quantities of alcohol grapes to the East Coast. The reason for such demand was the market that Prohibition had unintentionally created: bootlegging. Months into Prohibition, and the sober, crimeless America that the Prohibitionists promised is far from reality. Criminals distilled industrial alcohol, mixing it with homebrewed liquor to produce cheap booze. This illegal alcohol, often distilled and transported at night, earned the name moonshine. Because industrial alcohol had been mixed with poisons to enforce Prohibition, cheap moonshine caused many to become blind, paralyzed, or even die. Prohibition had not gotten rid of the liquor business, but instead had just handed it to criminals. Gangs organized rum-running operations to smuggle liquor from Canada and Mexico. Mobs bought shut-down breweries and operated them illegally, employing lawyers, accountants, brewmasters, boat captains, truckers, and warehousemen. Even regular citizens were happy to distill booze in their own homes. With gangs on the rise due to Prohibition profits, crime was rampant in the cities. Arrests made after the first 6 months of Prohibition increased by 25%. Al Capone, the most infamous gangster of the era, made the equivalent of $1.3 billion yearly running his bootlegging operation in South Chicago. At one point, he paid the Chicago police the equivalent of $6 million a month to let him operate his liquor business. One Chicago police chief estimated that 60% of his workers were in the bootlegging business. Violent crime was an important part of mob operations. Oftentimes, gang leaders would be killed publicly by members of an enemy mob. With the increase of illegal smuggling operations, one would expect society to despise the rise in crime. However, society's reaction was quite the opposite. In fact, gangsters such as Al Capone were not viewed as wanted criminals, but as celebrities. Although the public did not condone the increase of violent crime, many even admired the bootleggers and their operations. The copious supply of illegal alcohol needed an outlet, and that outlet was the speakeasy. Speakeasies were secretive, primarily mob-owned bars that would sell illegal alcohol to citizens, known for having a bouncer at the door who would look through a peephole in order to screen visitors. Although illegal, speakeasies were extremely common throughout the country, especially in cities. In New York alone, there were an estimated 32,000 speakeasies, a testament to how socially acceptable it was to break the law. One graph shows alcohol deaths dropping significantly in 1920, only to quickly return to its pre-Prohibition rate, suggesting that Prohibition was effective initially, but society quickly learned to disregard it. While the 18th Amendment was successful in losing tax dollars to illegal liquor operations and increasing violent crime, it was, in the end, ineffective at restricting alcohol consumption. If someone wanted alcohol, they got it, and people didn't care that it was illegal. While the problem of alcohol abuse needed a solution, removing people's right to access alcohol only worsened its negative impact on society, and Americans felt no responsibility to uphold alcohol laws.